You're watching this video because something inside you is shifting and the universe is responding. This isn't random scrolling, this isn't coincidence. You were called here. Not everyone receives this signal. Only the few who are ready. Less than 1% ever tune into this frequency, and if these words reached you, it means you've been chosen to receive them now. Your reality is reorganizing as we speak. Being here isn't casual, it's confirmation. What you're experiencing right now is the final test, the checkpoint before collapse. In quantum terms, every possibility was in superposition, waiting for you to observe it. And this moment, this very moment, marks the collapse. Nothing in your outer world needed to shift first, because manifestation always begins in consciousness. This video isn't information, it's transmission, a realignment of frequency already happening in your field. So I'll ask you, are you ready to cross what only 1% ever cross? It might sound strange at first, but every possibility you've ever dreamed of isn't somewhere out there waiting to be built. It's already here, in a state of superposition. Think of your life as a vast quantum field, where countless timelines coexist, each carrying a different version of your identity, abundance, alignment, and coherence. The key isn't about chasing, but about observing. Just like Schrödinger's cat exists in both life and death, until someone opens the box, your reality floats in probabilities, until consciousness collapses it. Right now, in this very moment, by receiving these words, the field is responding to your awareness. The observation is happening and energy is reorganizing itself. When people talk about manifestation, they often think it's about effort, strategies, or forcing reality into shape. But manifestation begins the moment observation meets surrender. Consciousness isn't a passive witness, it's an active participant in the collapse of probability into form. Energy doesn't wait for perfect conditions, it responds instantly to coherence. That's why synchronicity shows up in bizarre ways. A text from someone you were thinking of, a door opening when resistance finally drops, or abundance appearing when you least expect. The field doesn't care about your doubts. It only aligns with what you're embodying right now. Here's the tricky part. Most people observe without realizing they're observing. They focus on what's missing and so collapse reality into more absence. They tune their frequency to lack, and the field echoes it back with uncanny precision. This is where readiness comes in, not readiness as perfection, but as willingness to see yourself as already receiving. Every timeline is waiting for you, but the one that becomes solid is the one you dare to give attention to. In other words, identity shapes observation, and observation shapes reality. The loop is seamless, but few notice they're running it. To make it clearer, imagine tuning into a radio. All frequencies are broadcasting simultaneously, but your dial determines which one becomes your experience. If you're vibrating in fear, you collapse into a reality of fear. If you're vibrating in abundance, that's what materializes. The fascinating part, neuroplasticity proves that your brain rewires itself based on what you continuously observe and embody. The collapse is not just mystical, it's deeply biological. Every thought sends signals, every signal reorganizes synapses, and every reorganization alters the field. The brain itself tunnels between probabilities like a particle moving through barriers. Let me give you a simple example. Have you ever had a day where everything seemed to go wrong from the start? You spill your coffee, miss the bus, get a harsh email, and suddenly the whole day collapses into that frequency of frustration. That wasn't coincidence, it was entanglement in action. Your observation fed the loop, and reality mirrored it back. But the reverse is equally true. If you pause, breathe, and align, the coherence shifts. A new phase transition begins, and synchronicity re-emerges. Suddenly someone offers help, or a solution pops out of nowhere. Observation is the pivot point. The truth is, collapse doesn't wait for permission. It's happening right now. You're constantly receiving feedback from the vacuum of potential, and every tiny choice redirects the tunnel of your timeline. Some call it luck, others call it fate. But consciousness knows better. It's simply the dance of energy reorganizing itself around alignment. And here's the catch. Resistance delays the collapse, but surrender accelerates it. The field is neutral, but your coherence isn't. That's why people who embody readiness seem magnetic, because the field cannot resist matching their vibration. Think of this video as that very moment of observation. It's not random scrolling, not coincidence. It's the field collapsing around your consciousness. Everything you've been asking for was already here, suspended in quantum superposition, waiting for the instant you'd align your awareness to it. This is the exact second where identity and reality lock eyes, where the vacuum stops being empty and becomes alive with emergence. The collapse begins the moment you realize you're not separate from the field. You are the field, observing itself into form. And yet, this is only the beginning. Because once you understand collapse, you face the next paradox. What do you do when you realize control isn't the key, but surrender is? Observation activates the field, but resistance can still distort it. That's why the true art isn't just in collapsing probabilities, it's in allowing them to unfold without interference. Which brings us to a deeper truth, one most people never see until they're forced into it: the power of non-resistance. Think about walking into a crowded cafe. You glance around, unsure where to sit. In that split second, every table is a possibility, the one near the window, the one in the corner, or maybe even sitting outside. But the moment you decide, the superposition collapses. Your consciousness made a choice, and reality aligned with it. That tiny act may feel trivial, yet it's the same principle behind bigger manifestations. What table you sit at may connect you to a stranger who changes your career, or to silence where your intuition whispers the next step. Consider relationships. Imagine texting someone you've been unsure about. The message you send or don't send collapses two completely different timelines, one where connection deepens and one where it fades. The person doesn't even need to reply immediately. Your act of observing them as important enough to reach out shifts the field. This is where synchronicity plays its trick. Suddenly you bump into them at the grocery store, or they call when you least expect it. Consciousness created coherence, and the universe mirrored back the alignment. Energy doesn't ask for logic, it responds to embodiment. Money works in the same way. You might look at your bank account and see scarcity collapsing into fear, or you might look at the same numbers and decide they are stepping stones toward abundance. It's the same field, but two identities observing differently. One spirals into resistance, the other into readiness. I've seen people change their entire financial trajectory not by working harder, but by shifting how they observe money. They stopped treating it like an enemy and began treating it like a partner. That tiny internal collapse created a massive external phase transition. Think about health. You wake up with a headache, and instantly your mind runs to worry. Something's wrong with me. That observation collapses the field into more resistance, stress and tension, amplifying the pain. But if you observe it differently, my body is signaling me to rest. The collapse reorganizes into recovery. Consciousness doesn't ignore the headache, it just interprets it in alignment. And what happens? You hydrate, breathe, maybe take a short nap, and the pain eases. The same symptom, but two completely different realities collapsed from it. Another everyday example, technology. Have you noticed how when you search for something online once, your feed seems to collapse around it? Suddenly, ads, videos, and articles appear everywhere. While algorithms do this digitally, consciousness does the same energetically. The field is like an infinite internet of probabilities, and what you observe It amplifies. That's why one thought about opportunity can spiral into synchronicity, while one thought about fear can spiral into obstacles. Both were always present, but your awareness tuned the frequency like a radio dial. Even traffic holds the lesson. You're stuck in a jam, feeling trapped, observing only frustration. That collapse makes every horn louder, every minute heavier. But shift observation, play your favorite podcast, reflect on an idea, or even breathe into patience, and the entire experience collapses differently. You're still in the jam, but you're not in resistance anymore. Synchronicity might even surprise you. The delay kept you from missing someone important later or from crossing paths with a problem at the wrong time. Collapse doesn't just shape outcomes, it reshapes meaning. Now think of conversations. Have you ever noticed how one word can collapse the whole tone of an interaction? A compliment shifts energy, opening abundance and alignment. A criticism collapses into resistance, triggering decoherence. In that moment, your identity isn't just responding, it's creating. The way you choose to observe someone, to see them with compassion or judgment, collapses the reality of that relationship. Over time, those micro-observations tunnel into entirely different timelines. Friendships built on trust or connections dissolved into silence. All of this points to one thing. Collapse isn't far away in a physics lab. It's happening in your kitchen, your office, your relationships, your thoughts. Every decision, every glance, every interpretation reorganizes the field. The superposition is endless, but the collapse is intimate. It happens wherever consciousness dares to observe. And yet, observation alone is not enough. Because when you try to control every outcome, resistance sneaks in. That's why the next step after understanding collapse is learning the art of surrender, the invisible power that allows energy to flow freely. Surrender is often misunderstood. People hear the word and immediately think it means giving up, losing control, or abandoning dreams. But in the quantum field, surrender has nothing to do with weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. It means you trust the frequency of coherence more than the illusion of control. The universe doesn't respond to begging, it responds to alignment. Think of a seed buried in the dark soil. It doesn't demand the sun, it doesn't resist the rain. It simply surrenders to the field, knowing that emergence is inevitable. In daily life, resistance shows up in subtle ways. You check your phone every 5 minutes, anxious for a reply that hasn't arrived. That constant monitoring collapses the timeline into impatience and scarcity. On the other hand, when you put the phone down and focus on your embodiment, walking, breathing, enjoying the moment, you send a signal of trust. The field interprets that as readiness. Synchronicity often follows. The message arrives just when you stopped waiting. That's the art of surrender, releasing control and letting the phase transition happen naturally. Here's a paradox. The harder you try to control reality, the more decoherence you create. Imagine trying to force sleep when you're restless. The more you resist, the more awake you become. But surrender, closing your eyes, breathing, trusting your body, ushers in rest without effort. Manifestation works the same way. You don't tunnel through timelines by pushing harder. You slip through by allowing. The vacuum doesn't respond to force. It responds to coherence. Control collapses possibilities too narrowly, but surrender opens the field wide. Think of money again. You may save every penny, check balances obsessively, and yet abundance feels absent. That's resistance disguised as responsibility. But when you loosen the grip, budget wisely, yes, but also allow generosity, you embody abundance. I once watched someone tip a street musician with joy, even when their own funds were low. 2 weeks later, unexpected money came through. Coincidence? Or was it energy reorganizing itself around surrender instead of fear? The field loves coherence, and generosity is coherence embodied. Surrender also applies to relationships. Have you ever tried to control someone's opinion of you? The more you force, the more resistance builds. But when you release the need for approval, something shifts. Suddenly, people feel your energy differently, lighter, freer, more magnetic. That's because identity no longer vibrates in lack. It vibrates in alignment. The same law that governs entanglement in physics governs human connection. When you let go of control, you collapse into realities where respect and love flow without pressure. Even creativity thrives on surrender. Writers often face the infamous blank page. The more they resist, the more paralyzed they feel. But when they surrender, writing without judgment, even nonsense at first, the flow begins. The quantum field doesn't reward perfectionism, it rewards embodiment. I've experienced this myself when recording. The best insights didn't come from planning every line, but from allowing words to flow. Resistance blocks intuition, but surrender opens the channel where synchronicity and inspiration tunnel into reality. Here's something practical you can try tonight. Before bed, instead of scripting every detail of what you want, whisper this: I allow what's aligned to find me. Then close your eyes and breathe into that frequency. That single act shifts your consciousness from control to coherence. You'll feel lighter, and often dreams, ideas, or even morning synchronicities confirm that the field received your signal. It's not about abandoning desire, it's about trusting energy to deliver in the perfect timeline. The seed doesn't fight the soil, it trusts the invisible. And so should you. Surrender is not about doing less, it's about embodying readiness. Non-resistance collapses chaos into order, turning vacuum into creation. But here lies the deeper challenge. How do we move from desire, which often carries the vibration of lack, into the vibration of already receiving? That's where the next key unfolds, a subtle yet powerful distinction between wanting and having. Desire feels natural. From childhood, we're taught to want, to crave toys, attention, success. But in the quantum field, desire alone vibrates as absence. It says, I don't have this yet. And the field, ever coherent, mirrors that back. Receiving, on the other hand, vibrates as certainty. It says, this is already mine. The difference is subtle but radical. Imagine tuning into a radio station. If you're on the wrong frequency, no matter how much you want the song, static is all you hear. Alignment only happens when you tune in to the frequency of having. Think about shopping online. When you click buy, you don't obsess every second over whether the package will arrive. You trust the process. You already feel like the item is yours. That's receiving. Desire is staring at the catalog forever, never clicking purchase. One collapses into manifestation, the other into longing. In consciousness, the order is placed the moment you embody the identity of I have. The delivery, whether by synchronicity, opportunity, or intuition, flows naturally after that collapse. The field doesn't delay, resistance does. Let's use love as an example. If you desire love from a place of lack, you send energy that says, I am incomplete. That collapses timelines of unavailability, disappointment, or constant chasing. But when you embody the frequency of love, self-respect, joy, abundance, you collapse realities where others recognize and reflect that alignment. Receiving isn't about pretending, it's about embodiment. The universe doesn't respond to words, it responds to coherence. Just like a magnet doesn't want to attract, it simply is magnetic. Here's a practical exercise. Close your eyes and imagine a desire you've carried for years. Instead of visualizing it as distant, feel it as present. If it's abundance, imagine checking your account and smiling with certainty. If it's love, imagine the warmth of being hugged. If it's health, imagine the vitality in your body. Don't just see it, embody it. Your brain, through neuroplasticity, rewires as if it's real. Consciousness doesn't distinguish between imagined and observed. That's why receiving is more powerful than desiring. Money illustrates this power well. Someone who desires money constantly checks balances, worries, resists. Someone who receives money walks differently, tips confidently, and makes decisions from abundance, even before numbers change. The funny part? Opportunities start tunneling into their field. New clients, unexpected gifts, synchronicities. The collapse shifted not because the external changed first, but because identity aligned with the frequency of already having. This is what abundance looks like. Not chasing, but embodying. Even in health, the same law applies. If you desire healing but keep observing symptoms with fear, the field mirrors resistance. But when you embody the frequency of healing, choosing nourishing foods, moving your body with joy, visualizing vitality, you collapse into timelines of recovery. Countless studies show placebo works because the body receives a reality before evidence. Desire says, "I hope it works." Receiving says, "It is already working." The difference is coherence. Let's not forget time. Many people desire a better future, but stay trapped in resistance to the present. That creates decoherence, always postponing abundance, but receiving collapses the future into the now. Imagine acting today as if the dream already unfolded. How would you walk, breathe, speak? That embodiment pulls the timeline forward. Energy reorganizes when you stop waiting and start living in alignment. That's why manifestation isn't delayed, it's only resisted. So here's the paradox. Desiring keeps you on the outside looking in, but receiving places you inside the field of abundance. One vibrates as scarcity, the other as readiness. The shift doesn't require effort, it requires surrender into coherence. But here's the twist. Before the collapse fully anchors, something else appears, something most people misunderstand. Reality places a test at the threshold of manifestation, a guardian at the portal, and how you respond decides whether you step through. Every great shift comes with a gatekeeper. In ancient myths, heroes never entered new worlds without first facing a dragon, a riddle, or a shadow in the cave. Quantum manifestation works the same way. Before the collapse solidifies into reality, resistance intensifies. It feels like chaos. Plans fail, relationships wobble, money tightens, emotions rise. But this isn't punishment, it's confirmation. The field is reorganizing, and the old identity struggles to hold on. The guardian of the portal doesn't block you, it checks your coherence. Imagine applying for your dream job. Suddenly, everything seems to go wrong. Interviews delayed, doubts rising, unexpected bills appearing. Many interpret this as a sign to quit, but in truth, it's the final test. The universe asks, do you still embody the frequency of readiness when reality appears hostile? This chaos is the vacuum tunneling into order. The portal doesn't open for desperation, it opens for alignment. That's why synchronicity often appears right after your greatest resistance. Think of relationships. Just before meeting someone aligned, many face heartbreak or solitude. It feels cruel, but it's the guardian working. The old identity, needy, resistant, fearful, collapses so the new embodiment can emerge. The dark night of loneliness isn't a void, it's a phase transition. It prepares you for love that mirrors coherence rather than resistance. The test is simple yet brutal. Can you remain in the frequency of love when everything feels like loss? The Guardian always asks this question. Here's a daily example. You decide to change your health, commit to new habits, and suddenly your schedule becomes overwhelming, cravings return, people tempt you. That's the Guardian. It checks whether your identity matches the timeline you're collapsing into. The moment you persist, not with force, but with surrender, you tunnel through resistance. Energy reorganizes, and suddenly the path clears. The test wasn't meant to stop you, it was meant to confirm you're aligned enough to receive. I've felt this myself. Before a major breakthrough in my work, I faced silence. No progress, no feedback, no results. It felt like the field had abandoned me, but I realized that silence was the cave, the guardian's domain. My old identity, impatient, desperate for recognition, had to die there. Only when I surrendered, embodying trust, did synchronicities explode. The test wasn't external, it was within. The collapse required a new version of me, and the guardian ensured the old one didn't sneak through. This is why many people quit right before the miracle. They interpret chaos as failure, not as the signpost of arrival. But energy doesn't play by human timelines. It knows coherence, not comfort. The portal is edge space, the place where identity unravels and reforms. Think of boiling water. Just before the phase transition into steam, chaos erupts. That turbulence is not the end, it's emergence. The guardian simply asks, are you ready to embody the new frequency? So when life feels darkest, remember, it's not rejection, it's recognition. The guardian isn't against you, it's for you. It strips away what cannot cross the threshold. The field will not collapse into a timeline you're not coherent enough to sustain. That's why the hardest days often precede breakthroughs. Resistance is loudest at the edge of manifestation. If it feels unbearable, you're standing at the border of the portal. The collapse is seconds away. And yet, there's something even more radical waiting on the other side. Because once you pass the guardian, the game changes. You stop chasing reality, and instead you recognize you already are the one who receives. The movie is already written, the projection already rolling. All that's left is to embody it. But to see this clearly, we need to step into the next layer of the field, the truth that you are not waiting for manifestation. You are manifestation. Reality is not waiting to be built, it's already projected. Imagine walking into a cinema. The movie is complete. Every scene filmed, every line delivered. You're not writing the script, you're just watching the projection. Consciousness works the same way. The version of you that embodies abundance, alignment, and coherence already exists in the field. You don't create it, you tune into it. Receiving means stepping into the theater and recognizing the film is yours. Desire asks, when will it happen? Receiving whispers, it already has. Think of actors preparing for a role. The great ones don't just memorize lines, they embody the character. They walk, breathe, and even dream as that person before cameras ever roll. That's the art of manifestation. You don't wait for abundance to arrive. You walk as abundance now. You don't wait for love to appear. You embody love in your gestures, your frequency, your energy. The field collapses around coherence, not hope. And coherence means identity already aligned with the timeline you seek. Here's a simple exercise. Ask yourself, if everything I wanted were already real, how would I wake up tomorrow? Would you rise slowly, breathe deeply, maybe even smile before checking your phone? Would you carry yourself differently through the day? Try it once. Act as if today is the day it all turned. You'll feel the field respond. Synchronicities begin tunneling into your path, not because something changed externally, but because you embodied the identity of receiving. Money is a perfect example. Someone who has money doesn't obsessively check their wallet. They trust flow. Try practicing that identity today. Next time you pay for something, instead of sighing in resistance, breathe in gratitude. Coherence in action. That single shift collapses timelines of scarcity into timelines of abundance. I've watched people attract unexpected income, not because they begged for it, but because they embodied generosity, trust, and readiness. The movie was already rolling, they just stepped into the right scene. Relationships too reveal this law. If you see yourself as unloved, you collapse into loneliness. But when you embody love, by complimenting strangers, showing kindness, speaking gently. You collapse realities where love finds you. Receiving isn't about waiting for someone to arrive. It's about walking as the version of you who already has love. That's embodiment. Energy doesn't lie. The field mirrors back exactly what you show up as, not what you wish for. Even in health, embodiment is key. Athletes often visualize victory before competing, not as fantasy, but as identity rehearsal. Their bodies respond with neuroplasticity, wiring circuits of strength and focus. You don't wait until you're healed to act like you're alive. You embody vitality now. Walk with posture, breathe fully, eat with reverence. The collapse follows embodiment. The body doesn't know the difference between rehearsal and reality. Consciousness instructs it either way. Here's the paradox. When you realize you already are the one who receives, the pressure dissolves. You're no longer chasing outcomes, you're embodying readiness. That frequency is magnetic, irresistible to the field. Synchronicity becomes natural, abundance flows, intuition sharpens. You're not asking reality to change, you're aligning with the version where it already has. The movie doesn't wait for your permission, it was always unfolding. You just tuned in, and yet there's still a deeper mystery. Because once you embody the receiver, you begin to notice something profound. Your emotions themselves carry frequencies that shape coherence. Every thought, every feeling generates chemistry in your body and signals in the field. To truly sustain embodiment, you must learn to master these emotional frequencies. And that opens the door to an even greater layer of quantum reality, the bridge between neuroplasticity and the field itself. Every emotion carries a frequency, and that frequency shapes the collapse of your reality. Fear vibrates low around 100 Hz, pulling timelines of resistance and decoherence. Love vibrates high, around 540 Hz, collapsing into synchronicity, abundance, and alignment. Scientists studying neuroplasticity show that the brain rewires itself based on what we feel repeatedly. Thoughts create chemistry, and chemistry becomes identity. That's why living in fear for months reshapes the nervous system into survival mode. But the same field responds differently when you embody love, gratitude, or surrender. Think of music. A song in a minor key instantly shifts your mood. Your body reacts, your breathing slows. Now imagine listening to 528 Hz, often called the frequency of healing. People describe feeling lighter, calmer, more coherent. It's not mystical, it's biological. Your cells respond to vibration, your heart rate adjusts, your brain synchronizes. Consciousness collapses realities through sound, emotion, and energy alike. Just as music can lift you out of sadness, embodying high frequencies shifts timelines. The body is both instrument and receiver. Everyday stress proves the same law. A difficult email arrives, and suddenly your chest tightens, your breath shortens, your field collapses into scarcity. That single emotional response rewires your neurochemistry, reinforcing resistance. But if you pause, breathe deeply, and shift into gratitude, I can handle this. The frequency changes. The brain releases different chemicals, coherence emerges, and solutions appear. Synchronicity often follows, not by chance, but because you collapsed into a different timeline. Emotional mastery is reality mastery. Here's a practice anyone can try. Before making an important decision, stop and notice your frequency. Are you in fear, rushing, resisting? Or are you calm, aligned, intuitive? Decisions made in fear collapse into resistance. Decisions made in coherence collapse into readiness. Neuroscience calls this emotional regulation. Quantum thinkers call it alignment. Both describe the same truth. Energy reorganizes itself around your dominant frequency. Choosing the state first ensures the outcome matches. Relationships reflect this vividly. Enter a conversation vibrating at irritation, and you collapse into conflict. Enter at compassion, and the same conversation may end in understanding. It's not about controlling the other, it's about coherence within yourself. Your emotional field entangles with theirs, creating superposition of possible outcomes. The timeline that solidifies depends on your frequency. That's why one kind word can reverse a fight, and one sarcastic remark can ignite it. Consciousness tunes the outcome before words even land. The body confirms it too. Chronic stress floods you with cortisol, keeping you in low vibration. Gratitude, however, triggers dopamine and oxytocin, aligning you with abundance and trust. Neuroplasticity ensures that whichever state you repeat becomes default wiring. In other words, the brain tunnels into the timeline it practices most. That's why daily practices, meditation, journaling, music, or simple breathing aren't just nice habits. They are collapses, rewiring your identity to sustain high-frequency coherence. A simple test: recall a joyful memory for 60 seconds. Notice how your body shifts, muscles relax, heart rate steadies, intuition sharpens. That single minute of coherence proves how quickly the field responds. If one memory can rewire your state, imagine what consistent embodiment could do. Frequency is not abstract, it's practical. Every thought, every song, every memory is a choice point, collapsing probabilities into lived reality. You're not stuck, you're simply tuned. But here lies the next paradox. If emotional frequency is so powerful, why do so many still struggle to manifest? Because the field often reorganizes in silence, in the vacuum, where evidence hasn't yet appeared. People misinterpret this void as failure, when in truth, it's the womb of creation. To sustain coherence, you must learn to trust the silence, the quantum stillness where the next timeline gestates. And that leads us directly into the mystery of the vacuum, the silence before manifestation. Every manifestation has a hidden stage: silence. It's the gap between planting the seed and seeing the sprout, the space where nothing seems to move. In quantum terms, it's the vacuum, a fertile emptiness where probabilities incubate before collapsing. Many people panic in this silence, mistaking it for absence. They think nothing is happening, when in truth, everything is happening. The field is reorganizing, tunneling through possibilities, weaving synchronicity behind the curtain. The vacuum is not dead space, it's gestation. Think of pregnancy. For months, nothing visible happens outside, yet inside, life is forming. The mother doesn't dig inside her body every day to check progress. She trusts the invisible. That's exactly how manifestation works. Your timeline is gestating in the vacuum. If you break the silence with doubt or resistance, you interrupt coherence. But if you trust, surrender, and embody readiness, the emergence comes naturally. The vacuum isn't punishment, it's protection, giving the new identity time to stabilize. Daily life offers similar metaphors. When you send a job application, you don't hear back instantly. The silence can feel unbearable, yet it's the space where decisions are being made. The same with relationships. After a deep conversation, silence may follow, not because connection is lost, but because integration is happening. The vacuum isn't rejection, it's recalibration. Consciousness uses silence to rewire, align, and prepare for the next phase transition. Music teaches this truth beautifully. Without silence between notes, there would be no melody, just noise. The pauses give meaning to sound. In the same way, the vacuum gives meaning to manifestation. It's the gap where your energy realigns, where coherence deepens. Many resist this silence, craving constant evidence. But evidence isn't proof of progress. Frequency is. The vacuum is where you embody without distraction, preparing the field for synchronicity to emerge. Here's a practical example: meditation. At first, it feels like nothing. Just silence, wandering thoughts, restlessness. But over time, that vacuum trains your consciousness. The nervous system resets, the brain rewires, intuition sharpens. Neuroscience calls it neuroplasticity, but spiritually, it's alignment. What looked like nothing was actually the deepest form of creation. The same applies to any area of life. The silence before the call back, the pause before the opportunity, the stillness before the collapse. Even in nature, silence is vital. Winter looks barren, but beneath the frozen ground, roots are strengthening. Trees don't resist the season. They surrender to the vacuum, knowing spring will emerge. Your life follows the same law. If things look quiet, don't assume you're stuck. That's the gestation phase, the incubation of your timeline. The vacuum holds the most potent energy. It's the stillness before emergence, the coherence before manifestation. Here's the paradox. The vacuum feels empty, but it's full. It holds every probability, every identity, every frequency waiting to collapse. When you feel nothing, you're actually standing in the richest field of all. That's why it's called quantum silence. It carries the hum of infinite timelines, waiting for your readiness. Trusting the vacuum is one of the hardest lessons because the ego hates stillness, but consciousness thrives in it. Silence is alignment disguised as absence, and yet silence doesn't last forever. The vacuum always births emergence, but it doesn't come from randomness. It comes from your future self pulling you forward. The void is where signals from the future travel back, entangling with your present identity, guiding you through synchronicity. That's why the next stage of the journey is even more mysterious, learning to read the signs of your future self, the one who already crossed the portal and is calling you now. What if the choices you're making today aren't random, but echoes from a version of you that already exists? In quantum physics, time isn't linear, it's fluid. Superposition means your future and present are entangled, exchanging information through synchronicity. That strange feeling of déjà vu. It's your future self-signaling alignment, the job that appears at the perfect time, the person you bump into on the street, the book that falls into your hands. These are not coincidences. They are breadcrumbs left by your future consciousness, guiding your timeline. Think of a GPS. When you set a destination, the system calculates routes. If you miss a turn, it recalculates, nudging you back on track. Your future self works the same way. It already dwells in the reality you crave, broadcasting signals backward through the field. You feel them as intuition, sudden impulses, or synchronicity. The path isn't being built, it's being revealed. Receiving those signals requires coherence. Ignoring them creates resistance. The GPS never stops guiding, it just waits for you to listen. Everyday examples confirm this. You think of a friend, and they text moments later. You're considering a career change, and suddenly see endless posts about it online. These synchronicities aren't random, they're entanglement. Your future self is collapsing signals into your present to pull you closer. If you surrender to them, you tunnel into the aligned timeline faster. If you resist, the signals intensify until you can't ignore them. Consciousness insists on coherence. It won't let you escape alignment forever. Have you ever felt like something found you? A book, a mentor, even a song that spoke directly to your soul? That's the reversal of time in action. Instead of you searching, reality delivers. Manifestation isn't chasing. It's receiving what your future self already placed in the vacuum. The field is generous, but it's precise. It only delivers what your identity is ready to embody. The signs are proof of readiness. They whisper, "You're closer than you think." This also explains resistance. Right before a breakthrough, you may feel torn, tested, or confused. That's because multiple timelines are vying for collapse. The guardian checks identity, but the future self pulls with coherence. It can feel like chaos, yet it's actually guidance. The harder the pull, the nearer the shift. If synchronicities multiply, if intuition sharpens, it's not by chance, it's by design. The reversal of time ensures you don't miss your own destiny. Here's something practical. Follow impulses that feel alive, even if they don't make sense. If you suddenly feel like visiting a place, calling someone, or starting a project, treat it as a breadcrumb. Often, that impulse leads to entanglement with opportunities you couldn't plan. The field works through intuition because the mind can't calculate infinite probabilities, but consciousness can. Your future self knows the route. All you need to do is trust the signals. I've experienced this myself. Before major shifts, I felt drawn to obscure books, unexpected conversations, even delays that seemed inconvenient. Later, I realized those random detours set the stage for breakthroughs. It was never random, it was alignment. The reversal of time ensured that the version of me I was becoming reached back to guide me. That's why embodiment matters, because the more coherent you are, the clearer the signals become. Abundance doesn't arrive from outside. It arrives from your own future self calling. And now, here's the ultimate twist. You didn't click this video by chance. Your future self did. That version of you who already crossed the portal, entangled with this moment, collapsing it into your now. Consciousness doesn't wait for tomorrow. It pulls tomorrow into today. The signs are everywhere, and they all point to one truth. You're ready. But the question lingers. What will you do with this readiness? Will you resist or will you embody? The field is waiting for your answer. You've felt it. Somewhere along this video, something activated inside you. That wasn't just words, it was energy reorganizing your field. Now it's your turn to anchor it. Comment below, I am ready. Not as empty text, but as a declaration. Every comment is an act of embodiment, collapsing the timeline where you step fully into this new identity. If this message moved you, don't keep it locked inside. Share it with someone who's also being tested. Someone standing on the edge of their own portal. Sometimes the right transmission delivered at the right moment is all it takes to shift an entire reality. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because this isn't a one-time message. It's a journey. Each video is another frequency, another step deeper into alignment. The next code waiting for you is, if this found you, your future self is calling. That's where you'll discover the signals pulling you forward through time, guiding you to the version of you that's already waiting.